welcome back to EDH Deck Building. I am your host, Demo, and we're doing some more spoilers from March of the Machine. And of course, I'm talking about the legendary creatures. We got a bunch already. This might be the last spoiler video I do. I think I've talked about, this is going to be 20 now that I'm talking about. There's a lot, and there really hasn't been a whole lot of duds either. A lot of them have been either really, really powerful or just really impactful in general. Certainly ones that I think people are going to go after. And we've had a lot of the pairing up commanders where we're pairing up legendary creatures, and we've also had a lot of the commanders that are transforming, and I'm going to be talking about both of those in this video. So let's start out with Kogla and Yadaro. And of course, Kogla is the Titan Ape and really, I think, underrated commander. I like the idea of being able to deal with creatures, being able to deal with artifacts and enchantments. You can also make your commander indestructible. It's pretty great. I think it's a great card in the 99 as well. And Yadaro, not so much, right? Of course, Yadaro has that cycling ability, which you really can't use. I'm not sure how people build that deck. There are a few people that have them. It's mostly just a big stompy creature. It's getting another kick at the can here, though, with Kogla. So 2 red, red, green, green. So a 6-mana commander. That pretty much makes sense given what the other two look like. Ape, Dinosaur, Turtle. 7/7. When Kogla and Yadaro enter the battlefield, choose one. It gains trample and haste until end of turn. Okay, so that's going to be the Yadaro ability, essentially. Or it fights target creature you don't control. So that's going to be the Kogla ability, obviously. So that's good. Again, you can just, I guess, swing with it right away, which is good. You can also fight a creature, which is probably, I would imagine, what you're going to be doing a little bit more. Pay 2 red, green, discard Kogla and Yadaro. Destroy up to 1 target artifact or enchantment. Shuffle Kogla and Yadaro into your library from your graveyard, then draw a card. Wow, so they actually revisited that ability. That's interesting. Obviously, they combined the two, right? They combined the destroy artifact or enchantment and also the Yadaro ability of, discarding and then shuffling it into your library. So we have the same sort of scenario here. And obviously, in order to discard this, you're going to want it in your hand. I'm just wondering how many people are actually going to do this. How many people are just going to say, okay, well, I have a 7/7 commander that I can give trample and haste and also can fight a creature. Again, you have the ETB here, so that's good. That last ability, though, is very interesting. Obviously, you have to get it into your hand. So you got Command Beacon, you got Road of Return, and you have obviously Campfire as well. Those are probably your 3 options there. Again, just like in my Name is One deck, because you're in green, you can very easily search for Command Beacon if you want to be doing that. Although in my Name is One deck, the payoff of getting it into your hand and then casting it from your hand is, you're getting a good payoff there. Here the payoff is pay 4 mana, destroy an artifact or enchantment. Let's just analyze this ability on its own. Okay, I have a card in my hand. Let's say this is in the 99 of your deck. I have this in my hand. I'm paying 4 mana, discarding this to destroy an artifact or enchantment. Now, 4 mana to destroy an artifact or enchantment is awful because, of course, you can just do it for 1 mana. But then you're going to shuffle it into your library from your graveyard and then draw a card. So 4 mana, destroy an artifact or enchantment, draw a card. That's not great. If there was a card, and I think there might be, right? Isn't Slice into Twain or something? Isn't that 4 mana? Destroy an artifact, enchantment, draw a card? And how many people play that, right? So, yeah, the payoff here of putting in the effort to put this in your hand doesn't seem great, right? And then it gets shuffled into your library. So if it's your commander, you're likely going to want to just put it back into your command zone. So I guess, again, you could get into some shenanigans here, and this could make an interesting build around because you could get in some shenanigans with Command Beacon. Command Beacon's probably your best bet here because you can recur it from your graveyard, right? You can play a Remnant Excavator or Crucible of Worlds or whatever, play it again, get your commander back again, and you're just going to be paying the 4 every time. You're discarding it from your hand. There's no commander tax here. So you could repeatedly do this. Your commander's command tax is going to get absurd at some point, so you're never going to actually want to cast it. And you are just destroying artifacts and enchantments and then drawing a card. The payoff's not great there. You could do that. You could also do an interesting deck where you have, because green searches for creatures really well. you could just let your commander go into the library, and then you could just, birthing pod or something, sacrifice a 5-mana creature. That might be a better way to go with it, where I can discard it, destroy an artifact enchantment, draw a card, shuffle it into my library, then birthing pod or some other creature search option. Probably the ones that put it directly into play is the best. I sack a 5-mana creature, put it directly into play, and then I can, obviously get the ETB, fight a creature, have it attack right away. I think you can make an interesting deck here. It's a difficult one, because at the end of the day, I think probably, like, that last ability is obviously not very easy to use, and the first ability is just okay, so I don't think a ton of people are going to be going after this one. Just like Kogla, I think this is likely a card that's going to see a lot more play in the 99. I will point out, again, just like Boseiju, right, with the channel ability, this is a great way to destroy artifacts and enchantments that can't get countered, right, because it's a discard, right, you're discarding it. So for that reason, I think this card probably could see play in the 99 of a lot of Gruul decks. As a commander, though, it's a tough one for sure. All right, moving on to Hiritsugo and Kari. 2 blue and a black ogre demon dragon. Okay. So we might be breaking with the pattern here, because Hiritsugo is red. I mean, you have the mono red version and then you have the black red version. So, the fact that this isn't red is, I guess the black red version is technically just a mono black creature. The ability's red, right? So I guess this kind of makes sense. So I guess this ability would probably be, we're probably ignoring the mono red Hiritsugo here, and we're probably just doing the black red one that is technically just black. So I imagine we're going to see an ability similar to that one. And then Kari is the swirling sky, right? That's the Neon Dynasty dragon that's bouncing permanents and whatnot, and getting instants and sorceries out of the graveyard, if I remember correctly. So let's see how much of that matches up. We got a 5/4 flyer here. When Hiritsugo and Kari enters the battlefield, draw 3 cards. That's pretty good. Then put 2 cards from your hand on top of your library in any order. Okay, so it's a brainstorm, right? When your commander enters the battlefield, you get the brainstorm. That's pretty good, and the fact that it's stapled on your commander means that you could very easily do a top deck manipulation sort of strategy here, right? Where you want to be putting stuff on top of your library so you can play it off top of your library or reveal it off the top of your library. There certainly is a lot you can do there. Also, like I say about Brainstorm, I'm not the hugest fan of that card, but it's great for draw triggers. You could do the same here, right? You're drawing 3 cards, so you're getting 3 draw triggers. So if you have Teferi's Ageless Insight in your deck, now you're going to be drawing 6 cards off of this. So I think that's probably probably almost an auto include in this deck, because now you're getting a ton of value off of your commander entering the battlefield. You get to draw 6 cards, and then you're only putting 2 back. So instead of just netting 1, you're netting 4, right? So that seems pretty good. What else are we doing here, though? When Hiritsugo and Kari dies, I like dies triggers on commanders. Exile the top card of your library. Target opponent loses life equal to its mana value. If it's an instant or sorcery card, you may cast it, without paying its mana cost. Yeah, so that would be the Hiritsugo ability there. I guess sort of combined a little bit. Okay, so the first ability is setting up the second ability. So it's very easy for you to cast your commander. Obviously, sack outlets are going to be big in this deck. You're going to cast your commander, it enters the battlefield. You draw 3 cards, and then you put a Rise of the Dark Realms on top of your library, right? So let's say we put a Rise of the Dark Realms on top of our library and play out this scenario. You then sacrifice your commander with a whatever, high market, a million different options there. So it's going to die. You can send it back to the command zone, but black has a lot of recursion, so you don't necessarily have to. Target opponent loses life equal to its mana value. So you're going to have one opponent lose 9 life. That's pretty good. If it's an instant or sorcery, which of course it is a sorcery, you may cast it without paying its mana cost. So now you get to cast a Rise of the Dark Realms for free. That's pretty good. However, okay, and a lot of people probably will look at a scenario like that or expropriate or something like that and say, oh, well, this is super busted. But let's just play out the scenario here, right? Your commander costs 5. You got to cast your commander. And you do have to have some setup here. You probably want to, obviously you got to have the sack outlets if you want to use it right away. Sack outlets are really, really important because your opponents can't respond to it, right? If your opponent has a Swords or a Path to Exile in their hand, they're ready for you to cast your commander. It doesn't matter because they can either sacrifice it in response to the swords, or they can just sacrifice it first and you can't respond to it because it has already died, because sacrificing is part of the activation of that ability. So there's no way around that. That's why cards like Viscera Seer are so great, right? Because it's impossible for them to not sacrifice, essentially. This to me very much feels like a Yuriko deck, doesn't it? Sort of like you're putting I guess Yuriko makes all your opponents lose a life, but I guess might be built in a similar way. This is going to be a popular commander for sure. I mean, you're doing that. I mean, first of all, everybody loves Brainstorm. I think might be the most overplayed card in the entire format. It's in like over 300,000 decks or something, and your commander's doing that. You're also, again, you got the draw triggers. You can set up the top of your library, and you can set up the top of your library for other things, but obviously you're going to want to do it for your commander's ability as well. You can very easily, because you're putting 2 cards on top of your library, you can set it up so that maybe the first card is for your commander when it dies, and the second card is for something else, right? So I mean, you do have to have your commander die, though. I guess you could just reanimate it and then repeat the process. So yeah, you could very easily, just like with Yuriko, you could play a, sort of more jankier. I don't know how janky you can get with Yuriko, but you could play just a straight up Ninja Tribal deck, like a lot of people too, still really powerful. Or you could play the really high powered CEDH version of that deck. And the same goes here. I think it is very easy for you to put a really, really high powered deck together with this. All right, we are moving on to a new Ayara, Widow of the Realm. 1 black elf noble 3/3. Tap, sacrifice another creature or artifact. So now we're sacrificing artifacts as well. That's very interesting, right? The original one, of course, is sacrificing just black creatures to draw a card. Here we can sacrifice any creature, or we can sacrifice artifacts, and it looks like we're in red here too, so that becomes extra good. The sacrifice artifact theme works great in red. Ayara, Widow of the Realm, deals X damage to target opponent or battle, and you gain X life, where X is the sacrifice permanent's mana value. So we have a lot of stuff dealing damage to battles. I haven't really covered it yet on my channel, and obviously I'm going to have to because it's a new card type. If you haven't seen them, it's a new card type. They're similar to Planeswalkers in that they have sort of a, it's not a loyalty ability, but they have that number that you want to reduce to 0. The interesting thing about it is, how often are your opponents going to have battles? I don't know if they're going to be that popular in the format. I guess only time will tell, but you can put them in your own deck because you want to flip them over. So how often are people going to throw battles in their Ayara deck so that they can deal damage to their own battle so that they can flip it over? That might be something that we're seeing. Possibly. I guess it depends how good they are. You're also gaining life here, so we can do all the life gain stuff. X is obviously the sacrifice permanent's mana value. So, it would be very easy to do the, a sad robot obviously probably would throw it in a Rakdos deck anyway. Now I can sacrifice it, draw a card, deals 4 damage to an opponent or a battle, and I get to gain 4 life. That seems pretty good. Again, you could do like Ichor Wellspring, where it comes into play. I draw a card, sacrifice it, deal damage, draw another card. Just fantastic value there. I love doing stuff like that. We have another ability here though, right? This is another transform commander. So 5 and a Phyrexian red mana. So again, we have a Rakdos commander here. Transform Ayara. Activate only as a sorcery. So that's it. Again, you're likely not going to pay the red. You're probably just going to pay 2 life. So it's only going to really cost you 5 to transform your commander. And on the backside, this will probably more define what we're going to be doing in this deck. Ayara, Furnace Queen. Phyrexian Elf Noble 4/4. At the beginning of combat on your turn, return up to 1 target artifact or creature card from your graveyard to the battlefield. It gains haste. Exile it at the beginning of the next end step. Yeah, so that's pretty good. That's pretty good for sure. I guess you could possibly ignore that first ability, right? If you wanted to do the more maybe powered up version here, you could ignore that first ability and I put a bunch of looting in my deck and just do a graveyard strategy. You could do that, I guess. This is exile at the beginning of the next end step, which means that it's not like the Unearth ability. You can very easily, you're going to want sack outlets in this deck anyway. You can very easily have that creature enter the battlefield, swing with it right away, and then after combat, sacrifice it so it goes back to the graveyard, and then you can use it again. It's very similar to Dawn of the Dead that way, and you could very easily throw Dawn of the Dead in this deck as well as sort of a backup for your commander. So you can just keep reusing the same creature over and over and over, because you just sacrifice it before it gets exiled, goes back to the graveyard, you use it again. I like the idea of using the front, though. I just think there's great value there. Again, I sacrifice my sad robot, I get the damage, I get the card draw off on my sad robot, I get the life gain, it goes to the graveyard, I flip my commander over, and now I can bring it back into play, I get the land, I can sacrifice it again, get another card draw, right? So I like the more value play here. There's not as much oomph with this ability, though, if you're just bringing back a Solemn Simulacrum from your graveyard, I guess. It's just good value. That's the kind of stuff that I like to do. I guess it would be a lot more scary to bring those giant scary creatures. I mean, obviously, if you're doing the giant scary creature thing, doesn't work as great with the first ability, because I'm not going to want to play an 8 mana creature, then sacrifice it. I mean, I'm going to get lots of damage and life, but that's way, way slower. It obviously is a lot easier to just Faithless Looting, chuck that giant creature in the graveyard, and then reanimate it at a later time. Pretty good. Pretty good. And just in a general reanimator strategy, this is a pretty good commander. But I also like the sacrifice artifact thing as well. I would definitely not forego that if I was putting this deck together. All right, and we got a new Vornclex, another one. And as expected, I think we're getting a new Praetor of each color here, and I believe they're all going to be sagas on the back as well. 3 green, this one, Phyrexian Praetor, 6/6, trample and reach. When Vornclex enters the battlefield, search your library for up to 2 forest cards. Reveal them, put them in your hand, and then shuffle. Okay, so they're not going into play. I was almost kind of expecting them to go into play there. Of course, we're going to transform it. 6 green. That's quite a bit. In fact, that's the original cost of the original Vornclex, I believe, right? So that might play into something here. Then return to the battlefield, transformed under its owner's control, activate only as a sorcery. On the back is what's probably really going to matter here. So the Grand Evolution, it's a saga, of course. Chapter 1, mill 10 cards. That's a lot of milling. Put up to 2 creature cards from among them, milled cards onto the battlefield. Wow. I don't know if I love that. That feels very much like a color pie break. That is just straight up reanimation in green, right? I don't know if I love that. I mean, the self-mill thing has more and more become a green thing, which, again, I don't love. It doesn't feel like a green thing. I mean, how it originally started with the green is like Hermit Druid, right? That was sort of the beginnings of this, green's going to self-mill itself until it gets lands. But, of course, it was always lands, right? All these cards we saw were green is looking for lands. That's really what the ability is I'm looking for lands, because of course that's what green does really, really well. And then it started to become, okay, well, you're milling lands, like the Mending of Dominaria was doing that, where I'm just milling cards. Now it becomes a little bit of a mill thing in green. And then the recursion strategy became more and more green, where I'm not only am I getting lands out of my graveyard now, but I'm starting to get other stuff as well. Again, green being able to get stuff out of graveyards is definitely not something that is new, but now we're straight up putting 2 creature cards from our graveyard onto the battlefield. And again, the creature thing is very much a green thing. Tooth and Nail is I go search my library for 2 creatures and put them directly onto the battlefield. But now what we've kind of done here is we've taken something that started out as a milling cards to get lands, and we've taken the green gets to go grab creatures and put them directly into play, and we've combined it into an ability that really isn't very green at all. This is just mill 10 cards, put up to 2 creature cards from among the milled cards onto the battlefield. You're just straight up recurring creatures out of the graveyard now. I mean, Garuda, there's a creature that's doing exactly this exact ability, and that's Dimir Colors, right? This really doesn't feel like a green ability at all. This is not something that green needed. Green already gets to do a whole lot of things in the commander format. Now we're just doing straight up recursion. I don't know if I love that. That really feels like a color pie break to me. Now 8 mana is a lot. You got 8 mana to flip this over. We're in green, so it's not that hard to get there. But 8 again, it just feels like a tooth and nail. I guess that's their thinking here. Is this just kind of is doing a tooth and nail thing? But if you really think about what this ability is doing, it is putting creatures from graveyard onto the battlefield, which is just not really a green thing. That's a black thing, maybe white. Anyway, second chapter, distribute 7 +1/+1 counters among any number of target creatures you control. That's very much a green thing. Also not bad. You get to distribute them anywhere you want. So you can put 5 on this guy, 2 on this guy, put 1 on each of 7 creatures if you want. That's not bad. Chapter 3, and of course this is the big one. Until end of turn, creatures you control gain. Pay 1. This creature fights target creature you don't control. And then you're going to exile it and flip it back over again. That's pretty good. Yeah, this creature fights target creature you don't control. Okay. Yeah, that's not bad at all. I would say I don't really have a lot of issues here with this, other than the fact that that first ability isn't like super overpowered either. I don't think it's super busted. It's pretty good. Again, Tooth and Nail's just better than that. But it just doesn't feel like a green ability. That's the part I don't love. Don't really love that. Again, we've sort of been slowly moving in this direction with green, where now green's self-milling and it's getting stuff out of the graveyard, and now we just have a straight-up recursion option here for green. I don't know if I love that. All right, moving on. And the last one today is the new Shieldred. And what do I've talked about 4 already. The Jin Kataxius, the Elish Norn. We only have Urabrask left. And I really hope that Urabrask is pretty darn good. Of course, the other ones have already been really good. Urabrask seems to get the short end of the stick usually. The original Urabrask, not very good. It was used a little bit in some formats maybe. Of course, in Commander, it doesn't really see a lot of play at all. And the new one they did, pretty interesting, but again, doesn't really see a lot of, all the Urabrasks are both not very powerful and also not very popular in the Commander format. So when we see the new Urabrask, hopefully I'm actually sort of hoping for Urabrask in this case, where I actually hope they make a pretty good one, or at least really interesting. So Shieldred, definitely Shieldred's not hurting in that department, right? The original Shieldred, super powerful, and the new Shieldred we just got last year already is like one of the most popular mono black commanders in the entire format. It might be like top 2 or 3 already. Everyone really likes it a lot, and again, obviously goes in the 99 a lot of decks. So the new one here, 3 black Phyrexian Praetor, 4/5, has Menace. When Shieldred enters the battlefield, each opponent sacrifices a non-token creature or planeswalker. So that is the sort of original Shieldred ability, right? Sort of. That's a great ETB. It has to be a non-token creature, so they can't just sacrifice a token. It's got to be something of value. Not bad. I mean, for 5 mana, not bad at all. Obviously, the ability that we really want to be looking for here is what's on the back. So you're going to pay 4 and a black this time. Exile Shieldred, return it to the battlefield transformed under owner's control. Activate only as a sorcery and only if an opponent has 8 or more cards in their graveyard. So we do have a stipulation here. Some of those transform abilities on the other ones, you actually had to do stuff. The Vornclex, you just had to pay the mana. That's it. Here we have 5 mana, but also we have a stipulation. Now an opponent has to have 8 or more cards in their graveyard. Well, I kind of like that. I kind of like there's a stipulation there. That leads me to believe that the backside's going to be pretty good. And it is the True Scriptures. Of course, it's a saga, and Chapter 1, for each opponent, destroy up to 1 target creature or planeswalker that player controls. That's pretty good. Again, just evaluating this as it costs 5 mana for me to transform this. You're essentially paying 5 mana to get that first ability, right? So 5 mana for each opponent, you destroy a creature or planeswalker. Pretty good. Not bad. That's pretty good value there just on its own. So Chapter 2, each opponent discards 3 cards and mills 3 cards. I would say that because we have just this cycle alone, obviously this is an enchantment. You might want to start loading up on the enchantment removal before these things get to like Chapter 2, Chapter 3, because a lot of them are like, again, milling 3 cards, who cares? Discarding 3 cards, that's really rough. And you could obviously build around that as well. Like a lot of this is just like typical black stuff. And in fact, I think there's other sagas that do very similar things. It seems like black sagas are always doing stuff like this, but it would be really easy to put a Guest Grimoire in this deck. You're going to draw a ton of cards when that triggers. Or a Waste Knot, obviously, is also going to be fantastic, where you're going to get a ton of triggers off your opponent's discarding and get a whole bunch of value off of it. So obviously that's an easy way to go here. Number 3, put all creature cards from all graveyards onto the battlefield under your control. So it's a Rise of the Dark Realms. Exile it, and then of course you're going to flip it back over. Wow. I mean, it's a little tough to evaluate these. Again, we have to keep in mind that we can proliferate here. The Jin Kataxius one is particularly bad because proliferating in blue is really, really easy, although we did get a lot of proliferate stuff. from Frixia will be 1. So it is very easy to proliferate these counters and skip through these steps quickly. What is that? Staff of Completion that just came out has a proliferate option. It's very easy to slot that in your deck if you want to be proliferating already, because it adds mana, it draws cards, it's just a very usable thing in any commander game, and then also has a proliferate option. So very easy to slot that in this deck or any of these Praetors so that you can skip through these steps a lot quicker, because that's probably what you're like. You want that Rise of the Dark Realms ability, and your opponents are going to want to get off the battlefield before you do, and waiting 3 turns to get there, or I guess 2 more turns, pretty good chance your opponents are going to be able to get it off the battlefield before then. Yeah, pretty good. I mean, they're all pretty good, right? This whole cycle so far has been pretty, like, they're no slouches. Some better than others. I would say this is this might be the second best one I've seen. Like, all those abilities are fantastic. Destroying your opponent's creatures, forcing your opponents to discard a bunch of cards. Even the ETB on the front is really great as well. And then Rise of the Dark Realms, can't go wrong with that, right? That's a great finisher in the format already. So, oh boy, yeah, they might want to start putting more enchantment removal or just more removal in general in your decks, guys. Just saying. All right, that is it for today. 5 more really, really good commanders. A lot of really powerful ones here for sure. Anyone super excited about some of these commanders that are coming out here? Which ones are you guys going to be going after? Let me know in the comments below. But that is it for today, and thanks for tuning in.